Anjanashalaakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurum Vaishnavamsha Shri Rupam Sagar Jatam Sahagana Raghunatham Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitamsha Nama Om Vishnu Padhaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamin Niti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Desha Tarine He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Deenabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namastute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanu Sute Devi Namami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpatarubhyasya Kripa Sindhubhya eva cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna. So welcome to the Bhakti Tattva Vivek series, which we have been discussing now every Sunday and Monday evening. So every time we begin our Bhakti Tattva Vivek, we recite the Mangala Charan of the first chapter. And so today also we will recite Yugapad Rajate Yasmin Bheda Bheda Vichitrata Vande Tam Krishna Chaitanyam Panchatatman Vitam Swataha Pranamya Gaura Chandrasya Sevakan Shuddha Vaishnavan Bhakti Tattva Vivekhakyam Shastram Vakshyami Yatnata Vishwa Vaishnava Dhasyasya Shudrasya Kinchanasya Me Etasmin Udyame Ekam Balam Bhagavati Shama. Very beautiful invoking the auspiciousness before writing Bhakti Tattva Vivek by Bhaktivinoda Thakur. So till now we have seen tasting and preaching bhakti, harm of false philosophies, and Rupa Goswami's definition. We went quite exhaustively in this definition. We spent almost 3 classes on this. Then the proofs. Then are we practicing Ananya Bhakti? Proofs from the Gita, Bhagavatam, we all went through this. And then Prabhupada's lecture proofs to know when Ananya Bhakti begins. When or on the Brahman realized vision, then pure devotional service begins. And another lecture, he speaks about Shraddha and the Goswami literature Shraddha. Shraddha Shabde Vishwas, Sudrida Nishtay. That is Sarva Dharman Paritejya. So that is Purna Shraddha, and we saw that also in the form of the chart here. That's where Ananya Bhakti begins. And this Purna Shraddha also, again, we gave references from the Uddhav Gita to prove that this Shraddha is referring to complete faith. So we discuss these two verses again as a puff to establish as Purna Shraddha. And yeah, this is the second verse. And then Bhaktivinoda Thakur also in another work mentions about the Shastriya Shraddha, where you are on the Madhyamadhikari platform. Till then, you have Karmadhikar. Their Adhikar for Karma is not yet gone. And again, Tavat Karmani, again, Prabhupada's disciples' commentaries also is establishing that Purna Shraddha. This is what up till now we have been discussing. And then we went back to Bhaktivinoda Thakur's article as his definition of Anya Bilashita Shunyam. So yesterday we discussed this. And this is quite brief here if you see, but we have quite exhaustively discussed this definition. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur is giving some additional insights and points, which yesterday quite in detail we went. In fact, we went very slowly so that everyone can participate in the discussion and get a clear understanding. So, Uttama Bhakti, why Rupa Goswami used the term Uttama? Why is this there? So, there is also Adama Bhakti. There is superior devotion and inferior devotion. So, Uttama Bhakti means when the kripa is completely pure. There is no contamination. Example is water. So, this is also called as Nirmala, Nirgun, Amishra, or Keval, or Akinchana Bhakti. So, whenever we speak about Bhakti, Rupa Goswami is referring to Uttama Bhakti. Otherwise, there is also mixed devotion. And Rupa Goswami is describing attributes or characteristics of Kevala Bhakti or Ananya Bhakti. There are other types of Bhakti called as Chala Bhakti, Pratibimba Bhakti, Chaya Bhakti, Karma Mishra Bhakti, Jnana Mishra Bhakti. These are not Shuddha Bhakti. So what these different types of Bhaktis are will be examined in chapter 2 of Bhakti Tattva Viveka. We will go through that time. So now he comes to the Swarupa Lakshan, the intrinsic attributes of Bhakti. Anukulena Krishna Anushila. So we saw Cheshta Rupa and Bhava Rupa Anushilanam. We have studied it. Only yesterday, these two statements we try to understand more deeply. That ultimately, it is Cheshta only, which is the characteristic. But one who has Bhava, he is impelled by Bhava. His actions, all his actions are actions done out of love. That's the point. Whereas the actions of a sadhaka are done because of the injunctions of the temple commander or the injunctions of Shastra, or there is fear that if I don't do, all that, it is guided by the injunctions. So Anukul and Pratikul also yesterday we saw. And then we went into the definition of Bhakti, Bhaj. It comes from the Bhaj Dhatu. So this is where we stopped yesterday. And now the next theme Bhaktivinoda Thakur discusses in his article is the object of worship is Bhagavan in Bhakti and not Brahman or Paramatma. So this in one sense is quite exhaustively discussed by Bhaktivinoda Thakur in Bhakti Tattva Viveka. Whereas even Jiva Goswami doesn't in his commentary discuss quite exhaustively. He says Krishna means Krishna, his avatars or things related to Krishna. That's it. But here, for some reason, Bhaktivinoda Thakur goes quite exhaustively in the discussion. So let us now today discuss this, that the object of Bhakti is Bhagwan and not Brahman or Paramatma. In the main verse of Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, the word Krishna Anushilanam has been used. The purport of this is that Swayam Bhagwan Shri Krishna is the sole ultimate objective indicated by the term Keval Bhakti, exclusive devotion. So the deeper purport of Krishna is Swayam Bhagwan Krishna. Not Dwarka Krishna, not Mathura Krishna, but it is Sham Sundar Krishna, Vraja Krishna. Because Kevala Bhakti or Ananya Bhakti or Uttama Bhakti is only found in Vrindavan. Otherwise, even in Dwarka or Mathura or in the Vaikuntha planets, it is all Mishra Bhakti. It is not Shuddha Bhakti. Please remember that. So, pure spontaneous love without any awe and reverence. That pure sentiment is only found in Vraj Bhakti. So that is why the object is Swayam Bhagavan Shri Krishna. The word Bhakti is also used for Narayan and various other expansions of Krishna. So I mentioned also when we were discussing Jiva Goswami's commentary that Bhakti Krishna refers to not only Krishna but all avatars, Matsya, Kurma, Vara, and their devotion is also counted as Bhakti. So it can be used for Narayana and all other expansions. But the point Bhaktivinoda Thakur is saying, but the complete sentiments of Bhakti that can be reciprocated with Krishna cannot be reciprocated with other forms. In Uttama Bhakti, the complete sentiments, the intimacy, what the friends of Krishna have, that they can climb on Krishna. Arjuna cannot climb on Krishna. After seeing the Vishwarup, he's trembling. And the intimacy which is there, that is only found in Swayam Bhagavan Krishna. The intimate reciprocations, the intimacy is there without any awe and reverence. So that's why it refers to Swayam Bhagavan. This point can be analyzed in detail in another occasion when the topic is more suitable for it. So more in detail about this is not also discussed in Bhakti Tattva Vivek because it is a subject matter of Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. And that's why Bhaktivinoda Thakur doesn't go more in detail about it. Any questions you have, you can always raise your hand. For the time being, it is necessary to understand that the Supreme Lord in his Bhagavan feature is the only object of Bhakti. Supreme Lord in his Bhagavan feature, not in his Brahman or Paramatma feature. Although the Supreme Absolute Truth, Paratattva, is one, it is manifested in three forms. That is Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. Vadanti tat tattva vidas, Tattvam yad jnanam advayam, Brahmeti Paramatmeti Bhagavan iti shabdate. So we know this famous verse from the Bhagavatam. It is there in the first canto, second chapter, verse 11. The absolute truth is non-dual. That one absolute truth is manifested into three: Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. It is that one thing, but it is perceived differently from the perceiver's point of view. It is only one. Advayam, that's why it is called as non-dual. So we have discussed quite a lot on this verse, so I will not discuss more again. So here, Brahman, Paramatma, Bhagavan, and the absolute truth, the Jnani who is a seeker can access the Sat feature of the absolute truth. Although Brahman is Sat Chit Anand, but he is able to access only the Sat feature. Paramatma, Sat and Chit. The yogi can access only the Sat and Chit feature of the absolute truth. Although Paramatma is Sat Chit Anand, Bhagavan, the Bhakta can access the Sat Chit and the Anand feature. So Brahman is Satchidananda, Paramatma is Satchidananda, Bhagavan is Satchidananda. But from the seeker's perspective, because the seeker is far away from the absolute truth, he is only able to access the Sat feature. Because the seeker is a little near, he is able to access only the Sat and Chit. And the Bhakta has a complete understanding of the Lord He is able to access the Sat Chit and the Anand feature. So we had discussed this in our previous discussions. Do you know what example I gave uh, to understand the absolute truth, to explain this philosophy? Anyone knows, anyone remembers? The absolute truth is compared to what? To understand this. Anyone knows? Can raise their hands? Okay. So the absolute truth is compared to, say, a gulab jamun. Now, yeah, Govinda Prabhu has raised his hand, but he has lowered it. Yes, Govinda Prabhu, anything you had to say?
Continue, Prabhuji. No problem.
So the absolute truth is compared to gulab jamun. Now, when the gulab jamun is being fried in the kitchen, especially those balls which are deep fried in ghee, gulab jamun has flavor, fragrance. It has a beautiful round shape texture. It has shape and texture. Now they are crispy balls, and gulab jamun has taste. So the absolute truth is compared to the gulab jamun. Now, suppose your mother is cooking gulab jamun down in the kitchen and you are locked on the first floor and you are able to only smell the gulab jamun. Now, although the gulab jamun has fragrance, shape, texture, touch, and taste, because you're locked on the first floor, you are only able to access the fragrance of the gulab jamun. That's it. Similarly, because the seeker, from the seeker's perspective, we are speaking, is far away from the absolute truth, he is able to only access the Sat feature, although Brahman is having Satchit and Anand features. Now, the yogi is like one who is able to enter the kitchen, but the kitchen is locked from inside. He is only able to see. He is able to see the gulab jamuns. And maybe he is able to touch it also. But his mother says, no, you cannot have it until it is offered. So he is not allowed to have it. He's able to see the gulab jamun, he's able to smell the gulab jamun, but he's not able to taste it. So, Chit, Sat and Chit is like the yogi who is a little nearer to the absolute. And Anand is one who is able to taste the gulab jamun. If you don't taste it, then what's the point? You can never get happiness just by smelling the fragrance and seeing and touching the gulab jamun. The real happiness in the heart is experienced when you taste the gulab jamun. So we experience Sat Chit Anand because the Bhakta understands the complete absolute truth as Bhagwan. So this is the example given. So this is the point that the absolute truth is one. It is manifested in Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagwan feature. Those who try to perceive the absolute truth through the cultivation of Gyan, knowledge, cannot realize anything beyond Brahman. They cannot. Through such scriptural endeavor, they try to cross the material existence by the negation of the qualities of the material world, a process known as neti neti. Thus, they imagine Brahman to be inconceivable, unmanifest, formless, and immutable. But merely imagining the absence of material qualities does not grant one factual realization of the absolute truth. So, the Jnani path is that material variety attracts and binds us. So they, by the process of Sankhya, analyzing the material elements, they break and they just negate, oh, this material variety, uh, they entangle themselves from. But this just negation of the negative will not yield positive knowledge of the Lord who is also having a positive form. The forms of this world, the beauty and the forms of this world attract. So that's why they try to dissect And ultimately, all these beautiful forms are made of matter: earth, water, fire, air, ether. So, just the negation of the negative is without not having the understanding of the positives form. It's just negation. So, it doesn't give one factual realization of the absolute truth. Such spiritualists think that because names, forms, qualities, and activities in the material world are all temporary and painful, Brahman, which exists beyond the contamination of matter, cannot possess eternal names, forms, qualities, pastimes, and so on. So they, from the negative axis, come to the zero axis. But they don't cross the zero axis to go to the positive axis where the Lord has names, qualities, forms, pastime. There are spiritual varieties. So they just go to the negative axis. That's it. And their understanding is that Brahman doesn't have name, form, qualities, pastimes. So that's why they conceive the Brahman as unmanifest, formless, immutable. They argue on the basis of evidence from the Shrutis, which emphasize the absence of material attributes in the Supreme, that the absolute truth is beyond the purview of mind and words, and that it has no ears, limbs, or other bodily parts. So this understanding also they get from where? From the Upanishads. The Upanishads speak about it, about the Brahman. These arguments have some place. Whatever arguments are there is some place for it. But they can be settled by analyzing the statement of Advaita Acharya found in the Chaitanya Chandrodaya Natak, written by Kavi Karnapur. So, how to synthesize and come to a conclusion based on these statements of Shruti that the Lord has no eye, ears, no limbs, no bodily parts? By this statement of Kavi Karnapur. Ya ya Shrutir Jalpati Nirvishesham Sa sa vidatte Savishesham eva Vichara yoge sati hantatasam Prayo baliya savishesham eva. Very beautiful verse this is. In whatever statements of the Shrutis, ya ya Shruti jalpate, where the impersonal aspect of the absolute truth is indicated, nirvishesham, in the very same statement, the personal aspect is also mentioned. Sa vidatte savishesham. Nirvishesh means the impersonal. Savishesh means personal aspect. By carefully analyzing all the statements of the Shrutis as a whole, Vichar yoge sati hanta tasam, we can see that the personal aspect is emphasized more. Prayo baliya savishesham eva. So the personal aspect has been emphasized more. Now, let us settle this statement of the Shrutis to understand. For example, one Shruti says that the absolute truth has no hands, no legs, and no eyes. But we understand that he does everything, travels everywhere, and sees everything. So the same Shruti which is saying that he has no hands, no legs, no eyes, but he also travels. So this inconceivable statement of the Shrutis, how somebody who has no hands, no legs, no eyes, no hands and legs at least, how can he move? How he can run? Because he has no eyes and no hands and no legs. So how do you settle this statement? How do you understand this statement then of the Shrutis? There is also a famous Upanishadic verse which is there in the Sri Ish Upanishads, which also establishes the same. So how do you understand? Who will answer this? Who will answer this? How do we settle the statement? Yes, Sridhama Charan Prabhuji.
Yes, Prabhuji, Lord has hand leg, as according to Bhagavad Gita, Sarvatra Pani Padatat, but he has no matter hand and leg like human being, condition soul.
Okay. Fine. Good answer. Govinda Prabhuji, what you had to say?
Same thing, Prabhuji. Lord has no hands means no material hands and legs like us, but he has transcendental spiritual hands and legs.
Okay, so now then I will open up this verse from the mantra 5 of the Ishmael. Tad ejati, tannejati, tad dure, tad tuantike, tad antarasya sarvasya, tad usarvasyasya bhayata. Tad, that absolute truth, ejati, walks. Tad, he, na ejati, does not walks. This is very contradictory. It says he walks, he does not walks. So how will we resolve this contradiction from the Upanishads? Because each Upanishad is a Upanishad Shruti. Who will resolve this conflict? Who will resolve based on the understanding of the absolute truth as Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan? How will you resolve this conflict? Who will answer this? That he walks and he does not walk. Okay, regarding the hands and legs, you mentioned that he has spiritual hands and spiritual legs, that's why. But how will you resolve this now? I hope the audio is better. Yes, Mataji. No, the audio is not clear, Mataji. I think we'll have to do something about it because every time it is happening means there must be some. You can type it, Mataji. I hope. Yes, who had raised hand? Sridhamacharampu, yes.
Well, according to Brahma Samhita, Anga Niyasi Sakalindasya Vritimante, Lord can do different activity in different senses. Like he can walk in the mind, he can eat through eye.
No. You see, here is saying the Lord walks and the Lord does not walk. Please understand. It's like, with the eye you can walk and eye you cannot walk. What is that? That doesn't resolve it.
No, please, I can answer.
Anything else? Anything else? Anyone else would like to try? Anyone else? So that's why understanding of absolute truth, we have to have a deeper understanding. So how do you resolve this contradiction? Tad ejati means the absolute, yeah. Okay, Govinda Prabhuji, yes. I'd like to hear what Govinda Prabhuji. Yes, Prabhuji.
Prabhuji, so in the form of Bhagavan or Paramatma, he can walk. As a Brahman future, he doesn't walk.
Yes. So that is how we resolve this. In his Brahman feature, he doesn't walk. But in his Paramatma or Bhagavan feature, he walks. Tad dhure is very far in his which feature? Bhagavan feature. Tad tu antike is very near. In which feature he is very near? In which feature he is very, very near? Anyone, please answer. Yes, go in the clue.
So in the future of Paramatma, he is very near.
He is very near to our heart. He is the closest person to our heart in this Paramatma feature. Now, Prabhupada takes this understanding of the Upanishads to a higher level. He says he is very near in his Bhagavan feature here also in the form of deity, he says. And he establishes deity worship here in his purports. Tadantar, he is inside. And Asya Sarvasya is outside everywhere. So how will you resolve this? which feature he is inside and everywhere. Yes,
In the form of Paramatma, he is within.
And then everywhere.
And he is outside everywhere is Paramatma. In Anu, in atom, everything is there.
Yeah, but it is in Brahman. Sarvam idam khalam Brahma. No? Yeah, all pervading Brahman feature is there, na?
Yes, that also.
Yes, yes. So that's how we have to resolve this contradiction. So that's the point. Yaya Shruti Jalpite, the Shrutis which emphasize on the Nirvishesh, that only also same Shrutis will establish the Savishesh. And Prayo Baliya Savishesham. But we see that the personal aspect is emphasized. We saw this example. For example, one Shruti says that the Absolute Truth has no hands, no legs, and no eyes, but we understand that he does everything, travels everywhere, and sees everything. The pure understanding of the statement is that he doesn't have material hands, legs, eyes, and so on as conditioned souls do. Yeah. His form is transcendental, meaning that it is beyond the 24 elements of the material nature and purely spiritual. So this is the understanding that he has spiritual form, spiritual eyes. By the cultivation of Gyan, it will appear that the impersonal Brahman is the supreme truth. Here, the subtlety is that Gyan itself is material. Please remember, Gyan is material. It is born out of Satvaguna. Meaning, in the material world, whatever knowledge we acquire or whatever philosophical principle Siddhant we establish is done by depending solely upon material attributes. Therefore, either that principle is material or by applying the process of negation of the material, it's called as Vyatirek, negation, by negation trying to establish something, we conceive of a principle that is opposite of gross matter. But this method, by this method, one cannot achieve the factual absolute. He is not this, not this, not this, not this, you're saying. But what he is, that is not being expressed. So just by saying not this, you cannot establish a what? Opposite. What is opposite of that? Is not matter, but you cannot establish that just by the niti process. In his Bhakti Sandarbha, Srila Jiva Goswami has outlined the relative truth that is attained by those who pursue the path of impersonal knowledge as follows. So as I mentioned that Bhaktivinoda Thakur is drawing his principles of this book Bhakti Tattva Viveka based on Jiva Goswami's Bhakti Sandarbhas. So some of the Sandarbha portion also he quotes, but he has kept it very simple in Bengali for common people also to understand. It's not as philosophical as the Bhakti Sandarbha. So he's quoting here that how those who pursue this path of impersonal, what is how it happens. Pratamata Shrotrinam hi Vivekas Tavan eva Yavata Jadatikritam Chinmatram Vastupatastam Bhavati. In the beginning, Pratamatha, the students who are pursuing the path of Gyan require sufficient discrimination. Shrotranam hi Viveka Tavan eva. Vivek means discrimination. To comprehend an existence of transcendent entity. Chinmatra Vastu Pastanam. There is a Vastu which is transcendental, that is beyond the contamination of gross matter. Yavat Jad Ati Riktam. This is beyond the matter. Transcendental entity, Vastu, substance, existence of a transcendental entity, Chinmatra Vastu, which is contamination, which is beyond matter. Tasmin Chinmatrepi Vastuni ye Vishesha Swarupa Bhuta Shakti Siddha Bhagavat Tattvadi Rupa Vartante Tamste Viviktam Na Shamyate. Although the specific attributes of Godhead established by the potencies inherent within the Lord's very nature are intrinsically present within that transcendent entity. Tasmin means that Chinmatra P Vastuni, that uh, transcendent entity, Chinmatra Vastu, Vishesha Sarupa Bhuta Shakti Siddha Bhagavat Adi Rupa. It has all these. The adherents of the path of Gyan are unable to perceive them. Tamsta Vivektum na Shamyante. They cannot, perceive them. Because I mentioned here, the Jnani perceiver is far away from the absolute truth. The Jnani is only able to smell the fragrance of Gulab Jamun. He has no idea that the Gulab Jamun has shape. It has taste, it has form, it has color, attributes. Those attributes cannot be perceived. I hope it's quite philosophical, but I hope you're able to follow. He cannot perceive. Now he gives an example to understand this. Yatha Rajni Khandini Jyotishi Jyotir Matratvepi Ye Mandalantar Bahishcha Diva Vimanadi Paraspara Pratak Bhuta Rashmi Paramanu Rupa Visheshatams Charma Chakshusha Na Shamanta Itya Anvaya Tadvat. For example, Yatha, the sun is a luminary that dispels the darkness of the light. Rajni Khandani Jyotishi Jyotir Matratvapi. Although its luminous quality is easily understood, Jyoti, the inner and outer workings of the sun planet, Mandala Antara Bahishya, the inner and the outer workings of the sun planet, the difference that exists between the individual particles of light, Paramanu Rup Vishesham, Bhuta Rashmi, Pratak Bhuta Rashmi, Paramanu Rupa Visheshastam, are all imperceptible to human eyes. Yes, we can just see light, but there is the inner ring, there is the outer ring, there are light particles. All these cannot be perceived by the human eyes. Charma Shakshu, we cannot perceive it. Similarly, those who view the transcendent entity through the eyes of impersonal knowledge are unable to perceive the Lord's divine personable attributes. Na Shamante iti Anvaya Tadvat. So this is the example Jiva Goswami is giving. Bhaktivinoda Thakur gives another example. Somebody who has got a myopic vision. Somebody sometimes has spectacles, which is like, 10 by 10. If he opens his specs, he just cannot see anything. It's blur. Although the deity is right in front of him, he just sees some light. So the deity has, the deity of Krishna, there is beautiful features. He is in Sham Sundar form, Tribhanga Lalita, holding the Venu, and he's got, the Barha Pidam, Natvara Karnayo, Karnikaram, all these beautiful features, but he just cannot, he just sees some blur light. That's it. So that's like, the defect of the perceiver, because he is far away from the absolute truth. So similarly, he cannot perceive the divine attributes. Purvacha cha yadi mahat kripa visheshena divya darshita bhavati tada visheshu balabdischa bhavet na cha nirvishesh chinmatra brahmanubhavena tallina eva bhavati. So how one can become free from this? If, as previously described, purvacha, one acquires transcendental vision, divya drishtita. How? By the mercy of the great devotees. Mahat kripa vishesha. One will be able to directly recognize the Lord's personal attributes. bhavati tada vishesha upalabdhischa bhavet. Otherwise, by realization of impersonal existential Brahman, one will attain only the state of merging into that Brahman. Na cha nirvisheshin matra Brahma anubhavam tan leena eva bhavati. Leen means merging. So this is Jiva Goswami's direct statements from the Bhakti Sandarbha, which Bhaktivinoda Thakur is quoting to understand the Brahman aspect. Now, Jiva Goswami is giving a proof. Idam eva. Bhagavad Gita 8.2. Swabhava adhyatmam uchyate iti anena Shri Gita suktam swasya shuddhasyatmano bhavana atmanya adhikritya vartmanatvad adhyatma shabdenochate itya artha. This knowledge is stated in the Bhagavad Gita 8.3. Swabhava adhyatma uchyate. There is 8.3 verse. Swabhava adhyatma uchyate. The inherent nature of the living entity is known as the self. So this statement is analyzed by Jiva Goswami now. What he says, the meaning of the words Sabhava and Adhyatma are as follows. Swa refers to the pure self, Shuddhatma. And the word Bhava refers to ascertainment. Hence, the ascertainment of the pure living entity as a unique individual, eternally related to the Supreme, is known as Swabhav. Swa. Swa means the pure self, not our Swabhav of the subtle body. It is a pure self. And ascertaining means understanding it. When the self, Atma, is made the principal subject of focus and thus given the power to act in its proper function, it is known as Adhyatma. That is the definition of what is Adhyatma. Adhyatma shabdena uchyate iti artha. This is the meaning of the word Adhyatma. So this is the praman he gives. We will not go into more detail of the pramans, but this is what Bhaktivinoda Thakur quotes. The purport is that when spiritual knowledge is acquired through the process of negation, niti, the absolute truth, which is transcendental to the illusionary material potency Maya, is realized only partially. Just like that seeker of the absolute truth, he only realizes the fragrance of the gulab jamun. He doesn't have idea of the shape, texture, color, taste of the gulab jamun. It is realized partially. The variegated aspect of the transcendence, which lies much deeper within, is not realized. If one who follows this process meets a personal self-realized Vaishnava spiritual master, then only can he be protected from the impediment, anartha of impersonalism. Impersonalism is also an anartha. Nirvishesha shunyavadi paschatya desha karani. Prabhupada's pranam mantra is there. Now, after Brahman, Bhaktivinoda Thakur speaks about the Paramatma. So any questions on this? Any clarifications anyone has? Virendra Yadav Prabhuji, yes.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu, Dandavat Pranam. Prabhu, there was one statement that knowledge is material.
Yes.
So is it referring to the knowledge which is spoken in Bhagavad Gita chapter 13, 8 to 12 verses? Is it referring that knowledge?
Yeah.
And how it's material?
The 12 items of knowledge. Because karma is Rajaguna. Karma is the action, there is Rajaguna. And Jnana is in Sattva. Bhakti is completely spiritual. Bhakti is completely spiritual. Bhakti is completely transcendental. So that's why you cannot attain bhakti by doing karma, by pious activity or sinful activity or whatever it is. no karma can produce bhakti. It is only bhakti which can produce bhakti. A pure devotee has bhakti, and when you come in touch with him, you can get bhakti. Because bhaktya sanjayate bhakti. So no material thing can produce anything spiritual. So bhakti is completely transcendental. Karma is basically within the modes, passion and ignorance. And jnana is being situated in the sattva, knowledge in the mode of goodness it is. So that is why even Sattvat Sanjayate Jnanam. The 14th chapter it will come. Sattvat Sanjayate Jnanam. So the Jnanis, although they are practicing their Jnana sadhana, within that elements of their Jnana sadhana, there is one element of bhakti which they practice. And because that bhakti element is there, the liberation also, if he is qualified for himself to become liberated, the liberation also they attain is because Bhakti Devi bestows that liberation to that Jnani. It is the bhakti which gives the fruit of the Jnana Phala, of the Jnana Marga. Even the karmis who do karma based on Varnashram, the phala is because there is some small bhakti element in it. And that Bhakti Devi, which is there, that awards the fruit of karma. It's not that, your karma, because of the law of karma, it is operating in. No, this is because of Bhakti Devi. So, even that jnana, which is born out of sattva, the jnani, when he is getting liberated, he has to give that up in order to attain liberation. So this is quite philosophically discussed in the Uddhav Gita, and one has to study the Uddhav Gita very thoroughly to understand these subjects. But just a few points I discussed. Is it okay, satisfactory to you?
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, Sridhama Charan Prabhuji.
As you show the previous PPT, where quoted the verse from Bhagavad Gita 8.3. Swa and self 8.3. Yeah. Swabhava dhyana uchyate. Suppose you can clear.
Swabhava adhyatma uchyate.
Swabhava adhyatma uchyate. Suppose you can clear what is the difference? How Swabhava and soul are the same or like this? I couldn't understand properly.
Swa refers to the pure self, Atma.
Yes.
Bhava refers to the ascertainment. Ascertainment means, ascertaining the truth or analysis. With pure intelligence, you realize yourself. So, Swa refers to the pure self, and the word Bhav refers to ascent. So, ascertainment of the pure entity as a unique individual, eternally related to Supreme, is known as Swabhav. Like, now to give you an example, actually this 8th chapter is not an easy chapter to understand. Without Jiva Goswami's explanation, especially what he has given in his works, it is very difficult to understand. Even I also had this difficulty, but I've heard now recently. So then I've got a little bit clearer understanding of what exactly in the 8th chapter Krishna is discussing. I say my nature, my inclination is for business. Okay. Now, this nature of inclination is based on the modes which are acting on the mind, the subtle body, and especially the mode of passion or ignorance. Passion and ignorance come in. Vaishya business. Business is a Vaishya. So he says, my nature is that I'm inclined towards business. So this is not his swabhava. The real swabhava is that his own nature is the self. The self is what? the part of the super self. So this kind of ascertainment is called as adhyatma. This kind of ascertainment is called as adhyatma. Are you able to understand, Prabhuji? Is it clear? I don't know why speaker view is not coming. Is it clear or no, Prabhuji? So this is the understanding one should have. Okay. There was one more hand raised. Okay. I don't know why my video went off. What is the reason? I don't know. Yes, Mataji has a question. Yes, Mataji.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, Dandavat Pranam.
Yes.
Please correct me if I put my framing in a wrong way. Is it not necessary to have knowledge to develop bhakti? If I have to quote this particular thing in Sambandha, Abhyudaya and Prayojan, I have to establish my sambandh with God. So for that, I need to gain knowledge to develop,
Yes.
right?
Yes,
So
yes. So this is where the uniqueness of bhakti is that whatever you hear, Gita, Bhagavatam, where knowledge about Bhagwan and bhakti and bhakta is given, that knowledge or cultivation of that knowledge, like studying Shastra, the bhakti literatures, that itself is an act of bhakti. That itself is the act of bhakti. And yes, knowledge is required. Bhagavat Sambandha Gyan is required to know how to execute bhakti, how to practice bhakti. Abhidheya Tattva has to be understood, because we have to understand who am I, who is Krishna, what is this material world, Sambandha Gyan, and then how do I establish my relationship Krishna by the process of bhakti. So what pleases the Lord? Hearing about him, chanting about him. Mat kata shravanado. So hearing his kata, Krishna is pleased. So doing these acts, and understanding the Abhidya Tattva is included as an anga of bhakti itself. It's not gyan. Whereas gyan means cultivation of knowledge with a purpose to attain liberation. There is a hetu behind it. So that is why in the Bhagavatam, Vasudeve Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Adokshaje Ahetuki Apratih no Janeti Ashu Vairagyam Jnanam Tad Ahetukam. So there the verse is Jnanam Tad Ahetukam. So by practicing bhakti to Vasudev, what happens? Vasudeve Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Prayojita. You attain the prayojan. And when you come to the prayojan stage, Janeti. Janeti means is born. Ashu, very quickly. What? Detachment. Detachment is born. There is no cultivation of detachment in the marg of bhakti. And jnanam, this knowledge of bhakti, is ahetuki. Ahetuki means it is without any cause. And this jnana will not lead to liberation, because the more we understand about bhakti, the more we'll practice bhakti. So this will lead to bhakti. Whereas the jnanis, they practice jnana and vairagya. Vairagya is the anga of bhakti, anga of jnana. And that's why they need knowledge of how, this material world is, how you can get entangled in this material world. So they practice vairagya as an anga of bhakti, anga of jnana, sorry. That is for the Gyan Marg. But we develop positive attraction towards Krishna, and the more we become attracted to Krishna, naturally detachment from matter follows. We don't have to separately cultivate. So that is the difference between the two. I hope it is clear.
Yes, Prabhuji. I mean, if I'm you going through any route, like through reading, through yoga, or through bhakti, if I realize on the realization platform, if I feel that bliss, so can I say that it is a Satchit Anand which I'm getting it? There's a glimpse of it. Whatever happiness we receive or get while through reading or through doing seva.
Yes, yes, definitely. Or any of the angas of bhakti which are done, and the experience we get, it's Bhakti Devi which is manifesting. So the bliss in the kirtan,
Yeah.
the happiness we experience, the misery also we experience, that is also what? That is also the mercy of Krishna and Bhakti Devi. Because all our past karmas are getting destroyed when we are going through suffering. And when the happiness we get, all our punyas are also destroyed, and Bhakti is bestowing spiritual bliss to us. So like that we have to understand.
Okay, Prabhuji. Thank you.
Yeah. So now let us go to the Brahman aspect is over. Now let us go to the Paramatma aspect. Those who pursue the path of yoga in the end arrive only at realization of the all-pervading super soul, Paramatma, all-pervading Paramatma. They cannot attain realization of the Supreme Lord in his ultimate manifestation. Paramatma, Ishwar, personal Vishnu, and so on are the objects of research in the yoga process. In this process, we can find a few attributes of bhakti, but it is not unalloyed devotion. Please remember. And you know what kind of bhakti is this called? Anyone knows this, path of yoga, which is practiced, where there is few attributes of bhakti. What kind of bhakti it is called? It is not Shuddha bhakti, but what bhakti it is called? Anyone knows? Govinda Prabhuji, yes.
Yoga Mishra Bhakti.
Yoga Mishra Bhakti, excellent. It's Mishra Bhakti, but it is Yoga Mishra Bhakti, not Karma Mishra or Jnana Mishra. It is Yoga Mishra Bhakti. Any other bhakti? Mixed devotion. It is mixed, but any other term, there is also another kind of bhakti which is, anyone knows? Anyone knows? Govinda Prabhu, I'll ask you. There is another bhakti also which is connected to Ashtanga Yoga. One is Yoga Mishra Bhakti, you said. What is the other one? Do you know?
No.
It is called as Bhakti Mishra Yoga. So it's very simple to understand. Yoga Mishra Bhakti. And the last term is Bhakti. There is predominance of Bhakti, but there is also mission of what? Yoga. There is predominance of Bhakti, but there is also mixture of yoga. So Yoga Mishra Bhakti is what is discussed in chapter 8 of Bhagavad Gita. Please remember. But those who are exclusively on the path of karma through Nishkama Karma Yoga, and they take up to Ashtanga Yoga, there they are exclusively practicing Ashtanga Yoga. And they attain, in one sense, Ishwar Sayuj, merging in the impersonal body of the Lord, merging in the body of the Lord. So there is major element of their practice is yoga, and only a small element is bhakti. So that's why it's called as Bhakti Mishra Yoga. Yoga is Ashtanga Yoga now here, and little bit bhakti is there. Whereas in Yoga Mishra Bhakti, there is bhakti which is predominant, but there is also a yoga. He is a combination of a yogi and a bhakta. But bhakti is predominant in him. So this is the difference. So where is Bhakti Mishra Yoga dealt in the Bhagavad Gita? Who will answer this? All this foundational knowledge is given in the Bhagavad Gita, in fact. That's why we should study the Bhagavad Gita very, very thoroughly. Then all these finer aspects will become clear. Which chapter deals with Bhakti Mishra Yoga? Govinda Prabhuji, you have to answer this. It's the 6th chapter of the Gita. So the 8th chapter is Yoga Mishra Bhakti, and Bhakti Mishra Yoga is discussed in the 6th chapter of the Gita. So the point is that there are few attributes of Bhakti, but it is not Shuddha Bhakti. Generally, religious people in this world that pass for the topmost spiritual path are all merely yoga processes that strive for realization of the Paramatma feature. Generally, we cannot expect that in the end all of them will ultimately lead us to the topmost path, Bhagavad Dharma, because in the process of meditation, there are numerous obstacles before one finally realizes the absolute truth. Besides, when after practicing either yoga or meditation for some time, one imagines that I am Brahman, there is maximum possibility of falling into the trap of impersonal spiritual jnana. In fact, a yogi who has mastered Ashtanga Yoga, even if he is able to see the Paramatma in the heart, he can fall into a trap that I and Paramatma are one. And ultimately, I have to merge. So he falls in the trap of impersonal spiritual jnana. In this process, the realization of the eternal form of Bhagavan and the variegated characteristics of transcendence is not available. So basically, in this Ashtanga Yoga process, Sat feature and Chit. Chit means conscious. You become, conscious that I am a conscious being, and the Lord is also a conscious being, and the Lord is observing me, and I am observing the Lord is observing me. Yo mam pashyati sarvatra sarvam cha mahi pashyati. 6.30 in the Bhagavad Gita. So that's it. The whole relationship is what? That I am conscious of the Lord, I am perceiving the Lord, and the Lord is perceiving me. There's only concepts perception. This is Shantaras. This is Shantaras, what we call. So only there is, there is a perception at this level. The form that is imagined at the time of meditational worship, upasana, whether it be the gigantic form of the Lord, conceived in the same of the universe, this is called as the Virat Purusha, or the four-armed form situated within the heart, is not eternal. Because Paramatma is not eternal. There is no Paramatma planet in the spiritual world. It is a temporary manifestation of the 3 Purusha avatars for this creation. This process is called Paramatma Darshan, realization of the Super Soul. Although this process is superior to the cultivation of impersonal Gyan, it is not the perfect and all-pleasing process. Ashtanga Yoga, Hatha Yoga, Karma Yoga, and all other yoga practices are included within this process. So all these are included in this process. Although Raj and Adhyatma Yoga follow this process to a certain extent, in most cases, it is merely included within the process of Gyan. So Raj Yoga and Adhyatma Yoga are mostly part of Gyan. And in 13.8 to 12, Adhyatma is there, as one of the angas there for the Gyanis. The philosophical conclusion is that realization of the supersoul cannot be called Shuddha Bhakti. In this regard, it is said in the Bhakti Sandarbha. Again, Bhaktivinoda Thakur is quoting from the Bhakti Sandarbha. Antaryami Tattva me Maya Shakti Prachura Chit Shakti Asha Vishishtam Paramatmeti. After the creation of this universe, the expansion of the Supreme Lord, who enters it as the controller of the material nature and who is situated as a maintainer of this creation, is known as Jagadishwar, the all-pervading Paramatma. His function is related morely to displaying the external potency rather than the internal potency. So the Paramatma feature, be it Mahavishnu or Garbhodakshai Vishnu or Shirodakshai Vishnu, how they control the Bhairanga Shakti, manifestation of the Jagat. They are called as Jagadishwars. Mahavishnu is the super soul of Pradhan. Garbhodakshai Vishnu is the super soul of each and every universe. And Shirodakshai is the super soul of each and every living entity, and he is also present in each and every atom. So it's more function related to the external potency rather than the internal potency. Therefore, this aspect of the absolute truth is naturally inferior to the supreme and the eternal as Bhagavan aspect. Absolute truth realized exclusively through the process of bhakti is called Bhagavan. So now Bhaktivinoda Thakur is coming to Bhagavan. In Bhakti Sandarbha, the characteristics of Bhagavan are described. Paripurna Sarva Shakti Vishishta Bhagavaniti. The complete absolute truth endowed with all transcendental potencies is called Bhagavan. After the creation of the universe, Bhagavan enters it through his partial expansion as Paramatma, as Garbhodakshai. He is situated as the super soul of the complete universe. And as Shirodakshai, he is situated as the super soul in the heart of every living entity. This I already explained. Again, in direct distinction from the manifested material worlds, Bhagavan appears as an impersonal Brahman. Hence, Bhagavan is the original aspect of Godhead and the supreme absolute truth. His intrinsic form, Sarup Vigraha, is transcendental. Completely spiritual bliss resides in him. His potencies are inconceivable and beyond any reasoning. Achintya Shakti he has got. He cannot be fathomed by any process fabricated by the knowledge of the infinitesimal living entity. We cannot understand by any of the means. It's only by the Lord's mercy and the pure devotee's mercy. By the influence of his inconceivable potency, the entire universe and all living entities residing within it have manifested. Jivas manifesting from the marginal potency, Tatashta Shakti, of Bhagavan becomes successful only by following the path of engaging exclusively in his transcendental loving service. Then, by the practice of chanting the holy name, Nam Bhajan, one can realize through one's transcendental eyes the unparalleled beauty of Bhagavan. In the Paramatma feature, there is just adoration. Oh, Bhagavan is, the Shrishti Karta. He is the creator of this universe. But beyond that, the Bhagavan has his also internal potency, which he manifests in his Vrindavan pastimes. So all those activities are part of the internal potency. And only by the process of bhakti, one can understand the Bhagavan feature. The process of Gyan and Yoga are incapable of approaching Bhagavan. When approached to the cultivation of impersonal knowledge, the Lord appears as a formless and effulgent impersonal Brahman. This I mentioned, when I showed. From the seeker's perspective, everything is Sat. And if he's seen through the eyes of yoga process, he appears as Paramatma invested with this material creation. So the Lord with his material potencies, creation. Bhakti is supremely pure. It is very painful for Bhakti Devi, the personification of Bhakti, to see the Supreme Personality in his lesser manifestation as Brahman or Paramatma. If she sees this anywhere, she cannot tolerate it. Just have 2 more slides to finish and we'll finish it because this discussion will get over. She cannot tolerate it. Out of these 3 manifestations, the absolute truth, it is only the manifestation of Bhagwan's personal form that is the object of bhakti. But even within Bhagwan's personal manifestation, there is one important distinction where the internal potency, Sarup Shakti, displays its complete opulence, Aishwarya. There Bhagwan appears as Vaikuntanath, Narayan. And where the internal potency displays its supreme sweetness, Madhurya. This doesn't refer to Madhurya Ras, the conjugal love. There Bhagwan appears as Sri Krishna. In his Aishwarya feature, he is Vaikuntanath, Mathuranath, Dwarkanath. But Madhurya feature, he is Krishna. Despite being predominant almost everywhere, Aishwarya loses its charm in the presence of Madhurya. In the material world, we cannot draw such a comparison. No such example is visible anywhere. Now, in Melukote, in a year once, Chalu Narayan Utsav Murti, there is one Kirita. Kirita means, I hope you understand. Kirita is the crown. This crown, Garuda was carrying, it has come from Vaikunta. It has fallen from Vaikunta to planet Earth here. And it is there, stored in the treasury of the government in Mysore. And only once a year it is got to Melukote, and the Lord procession goes on, and devotees from all over the country, many Sri Vaishnavas, they come to have the darshan. The Lord who is wearing this kirita, which is completely bedecked with jewels, and they are not of this world also. Can you imagine that? So Aishwarya feature is like that. And Aishwarya is what is predominated in this material world. But actually, Aishwarya loses its charm in the presence of Madhurya. Krishna, in Vrindavan, what he wears, he doesn't wear any crown. He's just wearing a peacock feather. That too, a feather of a bird just fallen down. And what he, decorates himself with some leaves, some kadamba flowers. But that is the sweetness. So although predominance is Aishwarya, but it loses in presence of Madhurya. And in the material world, Bhaktivinoda Thakur says there is no example. In the material world, Aishwarya is more influential than Madhurya, but in the spiritual world, it is completely the opposite. In the spiritual world, Madhurya is predominated. Aishwarya is not. There, Madhurya is superior and more influential than Aishwarya. Oh, my dear devotees, all of you just deliberate upon Aishwarya one time, and then afterwards lovingly bring sentiments of Madhurya into your hearts. Of course, this is a very elaborate topic. Madhurya means sweetness, how the Lord loves his devotees, how the Lord protects his devotees, how the Lord reciprocates. So the Aishwarya feature is to understand how the Lord creates this universe. Maya dakshena prakriti, bhumi rapo analo vayu. But dadami buddhi yogam tam, tesham satate uktanam, bhajatam priti purvakam dadami. This is Madhurya feature of the Lord. But doing so, you will be able to understand this By doing so, you will be able to understand this truth. Just as in the material world, when the sun rises and consumes the moonlight, similarly, when the taste of the sweetness of Madhurya appears in the devotee's heart, he no longer finds Aishwarya to be tasteful. Just like with rising of the sun, the moon's charm is gone. Similarly, with the rising of the sweetness of Krishna's attributes, understanding, Aishwarya fades away, should fade away. You should not have taste for the Aishwarya feature of it. And then he quotes this very beautiful verse from the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. Siddhantastua abhedepi Shrisha Krishna Sarupayo Rasot Karshate Krishna Rupam Esha Rasa Sthiti. Though the forms of Vishnu and Krishna are non-different, Siddhantasta to Abhedapi, there is no difference according to the scripture. Krishna's form is shown to be superior because of rasas. Shrisha Krishna Sarupya. Shrish means Shri ke Ish, that is Krishna, Vaikuntanath. There is no difference between Vishnu, Narayan or Krishna, Sarup. There is no difference. But Rasa Utkarsha, Rasotkarshena, because of Rasa, Krishna Rupa is superior. Esha Rasa Sthiti, the very nature of his Rasa shows Krishna's form to be superior. So this is how Bhaktivinoda Thakur will be discussing about it. This topic will be made clear later in the discussion. But for now, it is essential to understand that favorable cultivation activities meant to please Sri Krishna, Anukulena Krishna Anushilam, is the sole intrinsic Swarup Lakshana of Bhakti. Thus, this confirms the same statement made under in the verse under discussion from Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Anya Bilashata. So now the marginal characteristics, Gauna Lakshan or Tatastha Lakshan, we will take up in the next class. This is very important for us to understand these Gaun Lakshan, because only by understanding Gaun Lakshan, then we can understand whether the bhakti is Shuddha or Mishra. By the Gaun Lakshan, the superior nature of bhakti is established, Uttama Bhakti. So all other different forms of bhakti also become clear with it. So we will take up this in the next class, the Gaun Lakshan. Any questions, any clarification anyone has? Yes, we will take this one question and wind up today. Virendra Yadav Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, just one clarification. This Paramatma feature, is this personal feature of Lord?
Yeah, it's a very interesting and nice question. Although the Paramatma, Kshirodakshaya Vishnu, Garbhodakshaya Vishnu and Karanodakshaya Vishnu have form. But the Aishwarya, understanding the Aishwarya, how the Lord is the Shrishti Karta, there is so much adoration, awe and reverence, and there is no intimacy of the Jiva. Oh, the Lord is so great. And there is just adoration. There's no intimacy in the form of, loving exchange in the form of reciprocation of service. Oh, the Lord is great. I'm insignificant. So let me serve the Lord. No, there is just a neutral adoration. That's it. And that is what is Shantaras. Shantaras, that is. But that love, when it goes a little one step ahead, that comes in the form of Dasiras, serving. And when that love still becomes more deeper, then there is friendship with the Lord, Sakyaras. And when that love becomes still more deeper, then there is, I am superior to the Lord. Lord, I am maintaining the Lord. Palan, like Mother Yashoda, So the devotees take a superior position there. That's how the love is intimate. And then then the madhurya, it still becomes, the love becomes still deeper. So like that, the adoration is there. And that's why it is in Shantaras. And, in this world also, we can see that sometimes in our relationships, we can go into Shantaras. Just like the husband and wife, they fight with each other. And then, although they are staying in the same home, they don't see each other. They don't talk to each other. And even when they are sleeping, they face opposite each other. So only when there is, service, there is reciprocation. So that service, first step begins in Dasaras, then moves on to higher. Are you clear?
Thank you, bro. Thank you, bro.
Okay. Fine. So thank you very much. Shri Bhakti Tattva Vivek ki jai, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur ki jai, Srila